What's up, fitness business nerds? Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with Pete Dupuis. I've had him back several times. He's a fantastic guest. You know him as the co-founder and co-owner of Cressy Sports Performance. And we talk about a ton of topics that I haven't been able to talk about with Pete before. It was a real blast. We started with talking about partnerships, and Pete shares why he thinks there's no one real recipe for finding the perfect business partner, which I agree with. We talk a little bit about the pros and cons of partnership broadly. He also shares some of the biggest challenges he's had in his partnership over the last almost 15 years. And then we also talk a lot about his process for managing, and I think I shared mine as well. We talk both about our processes for managing underperforming employees. So if that sounds fun for you, then keep on listening. Business for Unicorns podcast is for fitness business owners who want actionable strategies to grow their business, take amazing care of their clients, and build a life and business they truly love. I'm your host, Michael Keeler, co-founder of Mark Fisher Fitness, and through Business for Unicorns, I'm a coach and consultant to industry-leading fitness studios around the world. Let's get started. Well, hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm very excited because I'm having a guest today, which you just heard about, Pete Dupuis, on for the third time. He's a record setter here on this podcast. He's the only person I've had on for this many times, except for Mark. And it's just because it's so fun talking to him. He's got so much knowledge, so much experience, and so much passion for this industry that I just always love having him as a guest. So let's welcome back Pete to the stage for the third time. What's up, my friend?
Thank you, as always.
Yeah.
I'd say I'm getting familiar with my office now, if there's some inconsistency in my background.
Yeah,
but I will start by saying that I cheated my way into a third visit because I put you on such a specific time restraint the last time we chatted that I didn't really give you an opportunity to hit what we were supposed to hit anyway. So I finagled a third visit.
That's great. I mean, we have like an endless list of things we can talk about. Even when thinking through today, I was like, well, we don't have to talk about COVID because we already did. We don't have to ask you the final 5 questions. We have more time. And I just came up with a list of 5 or 6 things, but we'll probably only get to 3 if I'm being real. And so let's just dive in. Let's just do this. Let's just chat. The first thing I want to talk to you about, and this is something that Mark and I get asked all the time, and I imagine you do too, because you're also in a well-known partnership, is the topic of partnerships. Mark and I get asked all the time, how is it having a business partner? And we're 50-50 in our business. And what are the pros and cons of partnerships? Will we do it again if we had the chance? How do we like having someone that we get to work with? Is it a double-edged sword? I mean, we get asked this all the time. And so I'll just start with you. I mean, start with this. How did you wind up in a partnership?
Well, our backstory is unique, and I think the most important thing to know is that I don't believe there to be a recipe for identifying the perfect business partner. I think there are mechanics that you can and should go through for vetting somebody. But we didn't apply a system to get to where we were. My business partner, Eric, and I were randomly assigned college roommates. And so if I were to tell you I've identified a can't fail or almost 100% guaranteed can't fail system for vetting whether or not you could start a business with someone, it would be live with them for about 10 months in a really forced tight space. In our case, it was a forced triple on a college campus at the age of 18. And you want to figure out what someone's about and find their biggest quirks and tendencies and make a call as to whether or not you could function with them professionally and personally for extended periods of time. That's it. And so I had a very easy decision to make, or I guess I'd say it was very simple for me to go into this partnership knowing who I was dealing with from a character and work ethic standpoint. So maybe if there's one big takeaway from my experience, it's reps, it's hours of exposure with the other person to figure out who they are and what they're about outside of a professional setting, which you and Mark obviously have as well. And I think that the two of us, you and I, we had an unfair advantage on our partnership search because we were working with people who we had upwards of a decade of exposure one-on-one with. So I knew that part wasn't going to fail going in.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great point. I mean, all too often I see people jump into partnerships with folks they just met. And, all the vetting and interviewing and, whatever the conversations, no matter how hard you work, at trying to see if you're the right fit. Someone you've known for a few weeks or a few months or even just a year is really hard to know what life is going to be like long term. Both of us, in fact, have known our business partner for many years. We, in fact, have lived together. We weren't in a dorm, but we have lived together multiple times at this point. And all of that, for me, I know, built a layer of trust, just a layer of, I know this person has my best interest at heart. That even when we disagree, I know that he's a smart person and must have a valuable perspective, so I can stay curious about it because I actually respect him as a human. And all of that, I think, has been, for at least for us, I'm hearing you say the same thing, has been an unfair advantage a little bit. In that if you're looking for a business partner out there now, or trying to decide if you should have one, I don't know. Like maybe what we're saying is look around you at the people you already trust. Look around you at the people you already know what their character is like and their work ethic is like. Yeah, I mean, it seems to have worked for the two of us.
Well, I think that for the two of us, we're part of this rare kind of small subsegment of business owners who can actually say yes to the question, have you, going in before you started, have you seen your business partner at their best, at their worst, at their most and least stressed? And have you seen them when they don't think anyone else is looking?
Yeah.
And I had all of that. I had all those touch points, just like Eric had them on me and Mark had them on you. So the vetting process in the moment when we were doing this in 2007, in my case, and right around 2012 for you guys?
11, yeah.
Yeah, it felt hasty in the sense that, I mean, I made this decision to do this with Eric and Tony Gentilcore on a couple hours notice. Sure. I went from almost accepting a job in corporate to getting a phone call from Eric saying things just kind of fell apart where I am. Do you want to do this? In like a 2-3 hour span. And so in that moment, I might've thought to myself, my God, this is reckless. I haven't done my homework. But I had been doing my homework for 8 years at that point. If you really start dating back to the fall of 1999, when we got stuffed into a tiny little dorm room and had to figure out who was going to be the the final say on how hot we keep the room or whether we turn on the air conditioning and how late we're going to be up listening to music, things like that. We did all of that. So that homework was done. We just didn't realize it.
Yeah, you were building that trust and rapport and collaboration skills and communication skills that whole time. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I mean, just looking back on the past, however long it's been, I'll let the listeners do the math. What would have been some of your biggest challenges in being in a partnership? What are some of the places where it gets the toughest to have a business partner?
We don't argue very often. I can probably count on one hand, if not like one or two fingers, the number of times we've really butted heads.
Yeah.
But I think that that's because we very deliberately stay in our own lanes. He doesn't want to do what I'm responsible for, just like I don't want to, nor am I capable of doing what he's responsible for. So we're allowed or able to avoid a lot of the common challenges just by having guardrails as far as expectations go. Yeah. But we did introduce some variables that made the role of partner considerably more challenging when we added a second facility, and suddenly we were functioning in different states. And so there are occasionally philosophical differences between how we want to manage the brand as a whole while it serves as an umbrella over two increasingly different operations. Because the thing I'm noticing with every single passing day, if not hour at this point in time, is that our Massachusetts facility is a small local business, whereas our Florida facility is a national, if not international, destination training facility.
Sure.
And those are two very, very, very different types of clients that you aspire to attract. And that's not to say that Florida isn't helping people from the local community and Massachusetts isn't helping professional athletes who come in from other states. But if we talk about it proportionate to what drives our revenues, here in Massachusetts, we're like 98% local. In Florida, they're well up over 50% revenues driven by people who don't technically live in the state of Florida. They might for parts of the year, but they're coming into town for small periods. So two very different businesses, when you really take that 30,000 foot view, And for a long time, we have been running them as if they're identical from the perspective of how we manage the brand, how we manage social media, how we talk about our clientele, the way we drive leads. The disparity has forced some tension over the years since 2014 when we made that move. But hey, they're problems we knew we were taking on, and we've had a good enough dialogue that we don't just bury it. We talk about stuff and work through.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you feel like you're handling that tension well, how does it go? I mean, what are the things that you both do to help hear each other out and manage these different perspectives and opinions?
Well, we don't carve out a ton of time for ongoing dialogue when we're in different states. Mm-hmm. It's just we're not big on the catch up. How are things? What's going on? We'll get on the phone once to twice a month and go deep on a bullet pointed list of things.
Sure.
My business partner, Eric, will send me, when he wants to have a call, he always sends me an email and it'll say the subject line will be quick ones. He always uses that. I don't know. It's just like his habit. And what it is a series of bullet points. And there are no excessive pleasantries on the front or back end of that email. It's a couple of stuff we need to touch. Bullet, 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 bullet. Are you available Tuesday or Wednesday this week to chat? And sounds good. Yes, these are the 2 times I want to do it. Let's hit it. And the phone call goes the exact same way.
Sure.
And it's just that the 2 of us have too many distractions and other variables to take into consideration with keeping our day-to-day in action.
Yeah, of course.
So we're just not going to play that song and dance. We're very direct and to the point. And it's kind of out of respect for each other's schedules. And look, we've known each other for 22 years now. And that might not seem like that much to you since your business partner was a friend growing up.
Sure.
But for me, I didn't meet Eric until I got to college. And now it's like, oh my God, we have more than 2 decades of dialogue. Yeah. We don't need to fake it. If we're not in the mood to play nice, it's just, hey, not in the mood today. Let's hit our bullet point list and knock this out real quick.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I mean, it's, what I'm hearing in your response there is, respecting of boundaries, having a communication kind of pattern that actually works for the both of you, that you probably developed over years. And also I'm hearing a sense of organization, that when you do have things to talk about, you decide what they are and how to talk about them and when. And even those things I think are great tips for our listeners and our viewers. Yeah. So I want to move away from partnerships, but one last question, just because I know not everyone listening is in one or cares about this topic, but it's important because I think a lot of people in this space do consider having a partner. Some people are in partnerships that are various degrees of working for them or not. So when you look back the last 10 plus years of your partnership, what do you think are some best practices that you think, things that have worked for you, ways that you've worked together and communicated that others should at least try as a potential best practice?
When possible, just standing FaceTime. So when Eric is in the state of Massachusetts, I don't get a single one of those quick ones emails. Never. It is a dialogue in our office, typically in the pre-business hours. And we do have a standing open door policy. If you want to come in and sit down and run through stuff, we pretty much do drop what we're doing so that we can get into that. But one-on-one dialogue. Just I will say this, we live in the email account and on occasional phone calls when he's in Florida because it's a necessity, not because it's our best dynamic. I'm not concerned with having a paper trail so I can point back to my correspondence with Eric and say, see, I did say this. No, I want to sit in the room with him and have conversations. So if you function under the same roof in some capacity over the course of a typical work week, then email is not an acceptable way to manage your partnership as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Sure, maybe a recap email, a meeting notes. I recently heard in a podcast the idea of a functional shared Google Sheet that all meeting participants use so you can see real-time updates so that people can say, no, that's not what I said. I just saw what you typed in there. That's not how we communicated. That is a way that we could do this.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Mark and I do.
Yeah, there you go. So I would propose that we utilize that approach. And you know what? I might have even learned it from meeting with you and Mark, where it's just this real-time, moving, living document. But outside of that, I don't think it's okay to make the excuse that you're maintaining or giving care to your partnership by doing it purely in an electronic format. Yeah. If you can be present, you should be present. because there's the opportunity things for like passive aggressive tension to come into play or things like that if you don't just have a rapport in person. So that'd be my best piece of advice. I also want to say you're not allowed to skip forward to next topics without talking about you and Mark, because your audience, the people listening to the Business for Unicorns podcast, as much or more for you and your thoughts as they do the audience, or sorry, the guest.
Sure.
So I'm here to learn, and I want to know the answers to the questions you're asking me as well, because you and Mark have a dynamic that doesn't exist in many parts of this industry.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess as now my third time guest, you're allowed to flip the script and make me answer questions too.
It's a privilege I've earned.
Yeah, well, I feel like I kind of just did on that one, in that I agree with you 100% that, setting up a method of communicating that works for both of you, that prioritizes face-to-face communication, that makes commitments and plans transparent, right, and organized. And that's why we use a shared Google Doc. Every meeting Mark and I have, we have a Google Doc that we update every week for, I don't know, almost 10 years now. And it's just a running list of here's what we're talking about. Here's what we decided. Here's who's doing what. We highlight on that document what action steps we're taking. Then we start each meeting by reviewing the highlights of those action steps, saying, cool, last week you said you would do this, and so we really are kind of managing each other. That's kind of been our approach to partnership, at least these last, I would say, maybe 5 years. Before that, I think our partnership looked a little bit more like there was an Ericsson that we both had very distinct lanes. And, we maybe did less checking in the first 5 years with each other, because I just trust he was doing all the fitness things. He mainly just trust I was doing all the quote business things. And the last 5 years, as our relationship has grown and our partnership has changed, and I maybe have a little more opinions about his side of the fence, and he has a little more opinions about my side of the fence, then it's been a lot more collaborative. And so for us, we really kind of use those regular meetings. For us, it's a weekly meeting to actually keep track of all the things we talk about, all the things we decide, who's doing what, and then we hold each other accountable, just like we would if we were each other's direct reports. And that works for us. Is that right for everyone? I don't know, but it's worked for us for a long time. And I think the best practices there are what you said: regular standing meetings, regular time together, prioritizing face-to-face. We'll always FaceTime. We very rarely phone, or we Zoom, of course, now. But even now, Mark and I live 30 minutes apart. He'll drive to me, I'll drive to him to prioritize that face-to-face time. And then just the organization and the accountability. I think those are best practices regardless of how partners do it.
I've always admired the way you guys use meetings. And I'll tell one of my favorite MFF stories. I don't have a lot of MFF stories, but and maybe I shared this. I know I didn't share this story in version 2 of this podcast, but I might have said it the first time we chatted on the Business for Unicorns podcast. But the first time I experienced MFF, I came down, I met up with you in Hell's Kitchen. Mm-hmm. We got ready for one of your live events. I think it was a Motivation Movement Lab Lab you guys were hosting. And you said, let's head over to the apartment where I believe you guys are living. And you're like, I'm going to show you the spot. And so you brought me in, and we're up there, and you're showing me rooms, opening doors. And you open up a door, and there's Mark and BPM, Brian Patrick Murphy, sitting, sobbing.
Yep.
I swear to you, they're just sitting there. They're like embraced, having a good cry session. And I initially felt terrible, thinking to myself, what did we just roll in on?
What kind of nonsense did we just roll up onto? Yeah.
And I had not met BPM in person. We had interacted on the internet. We were aware of each other. And he jumped out of his seat, still crying, gave me a hug like he knew me.
Yep.
And he said, you showed up for the best part of our post-mortem session. And I was like, what? What are we talking about? He's talking to me like I'm an old friend.
Yep.
He said, Mark and I are talking about how this business is going to die someday, and we're envisioning how it may happen so that we can get ahead of it. And I thought to myself, my God, there are reactive meetings and there are proactive meetings.
Sure.
And that was the first time I had ever come on to, I guess, is it a pre-mortem, a post-mortem, whatever it was. Yep. It was something I had never put the time into considering. And I realized you guys don't just meet. You guys meet in a unique way, in a very intentional way. Yeah. And I thought of BPM as a founder of sorts there. So you could kind of say that was a founders meeting as well, or a partnership type meeting. And that is one of my favorite MFF stories.
Well, first of all, they're both going to love that you told that story. That's amazing. Well, I know it's true, and I think what they were doing there, we tend to once in a while do this thing called pre-mortem, or basically, if MFF is going to die, or this project isn't going to land, or this service we're just launching is going to totally fail. Let's just imagine all the ways it can fail right now, as a way of spending our time, strategizing around how to avoid those pitfalls. And that's probably what they're doing. And with Mark and Brian Patrick Murphy, they tend to go full out. I mean, they fully, they're both former actors. They fully embody that exercise, and we're probably sobbing to each other in this room. And yes, I'd like to think that most of our meetings don't end in tears, but you're right in that we've always had a very, I don't know what it is, very focused approach to meetings. We've tried to, at least, in that time is just so precious that we get to spend face to face together, whether it's partnerships, just me and Mark, or Mark and BPM, or our whole team. They're precious, and they can be expensive to have everyone in the room. And to make sure that we're using that time where we're face to face the best possible way we can is something we've always been so passionate about. So I'm glad that was one of your memories, because it is kind of a core tenet for us, is to make sure our meetings are well spent.
Well, even when you guys were both in Manhattan as well, I did take note of the fact that you met off-site a fair amount.
Yeah.
Because when I would come down to chat with you guys,
Yep.
you'd say, "Oh, we've booked a room. We're either meeting on the front end or the back end of when the three of us are getting together, but we've got our monthly or our biweekly or whatever it is." And I thought it was very smart to get outside of the dynamics of either of the clubhouse locations, just so you could make some focus work happen.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's one, to get away from distractions, for sure, but I think a lot of research shows that that our context really impacts our thinking, right? That our location, our physical environment, really impacts the dynamics of our thinking and our communication with others. And so we can get out of our regular space where we think in our regular way with the regular things around us. Then it has the ability to bring more creativity and innovation and help us solve problems that we were stuck on. And so I found it just helps. Not to mention, it's just a breath of fresh air. Right? It's just kind of nice just to be somewhere else, And so I think that's another way that we've tried to keep meetings really focused, is also try to keep them fun and engaging, and keep it, keep us on our toes, because meetings often just become so boring and so monotonous because they're with the same people at the same time, same place, talking about the same crap. And that's part of why meetings get such a bad rap. But meetings done well can be the best part of your week.
Yep. I like it.
And be like the best time spent on improving the business. That's ideally what they are, and that's not, we don't always meet that bar, I don't think, but that's always been our goal. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is the number one question I get as a business coach these days. And it's probably my number one question I've gotten forever. When I talk to business owners and entrepreneurs and just managers and leaders in general, the number one question they want to work on me with is they have some underperforming employee, and they just, quote, can't get them to do what they want them to do. This is the number one thing. I mean, there hasn't been a week that's gone by nearly in these last, 8+ years that I've been coaching people. There's not someone who comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm managing this person or this team, and I just can't get them to do what I want them to do." And so I thought, let's just ask Pete about this, because, I've been helping with this problem for a long time, but I wonder what your approach is. So when you have people, I'll start with you, on your team who are just not performing, where you feel like you've set clear expectations and it's just not happening, where do you start? Where do you even start in addressing that?
That's a great question. Well, oftentimes I start with Business for Unicorns material, to be honest.
Great answer.
I lean hard on some of the early people management stuff you and Mark were publishing, and the lessons that I learned from you guys, especially Mark, where I've run into when we get into questions about, I don't want to call it discipline, but getting an employee to grasp the significance of the situation. He gave me some insight on what sounded like kind of like a 3-strike type approach to documentation and delivering those messages, which I have poorly reshared with my clients over the years. I use bits and pieces of it, but I would again like to flip the script and ask that you explain how you guys approach managing, let's say, perpetually late staff members or people who are habitually pushing boundaries in a way that doesn't expose the business to risk long term from a labor law standpoint, and then also gets people nudged back in the right direction. Because Mark first told me about this in maybe the spring of 2017 or 2018 while we were down in Florida together at an event. And it really resonated with me because I realized I wasn't making an effort to document the dialogue. To say, this is strike one. Hey, it's on me. This is how I do it based on what I've learned from you guys.
Yep.
It's the first issue is we have an issue. It's on me because I obviously didn't do a nice enough job of illustrating to you the significance of this, why it's important to me, why it's important to the business. But I want you to know that it's an issue for me, and moving forward, we need to address it. Yep. Just giving you a heads up now. Maybe a follow-up email afterwards saying, hey, thanks for chatting today. I'm glad we could get on the same page about XYZ. Seems that we both understand my expectations moving forward. Let me know how I can help. Great. Second time it happens, we come back and we say, hey, don't know if you remember, but we had this conversation on this date. And my understanding was that we agreed on this, this, and this. So we're going to need to get a little bit more formal about this. I just want to put on record that this is what we discussed, and here's how we're fixing it, because second time's on you, and third time is actually a strike three, and we're going to move forward with termination, or we're going to need to part ways, basically. And then if and when, God forbid, we end up at that third strike, we say, hey, there is a little bit of documentation here. There's a paper trail. We have met on these 2 dates. Here's the move we're going to make. I hope you understand, and I wish you well. How can I help you on the way out the door? That's kind of how I would handle it. I know your question wasn't quite so extreme. How do you fire people?
Yeah, no, but still.
But it was one of the most valuable things I took from Mark in these conversations in the past. And if you could tell me where I'm missing opportunity to clean that system up, I would like to continue to learn from you if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's amazing. You crushed it. I mean, that's a really great place to start. And you're right. We've always, pretty much since day one at Mark Fisher Fitness, had a 3 strikes, you're out kind of policy when it comes to things that can result or should result in someone being fired, right? And that process doesn't happen if someone's maybe just late. Right. We probably don't fire people in their third lateness, but certainly for more serious things, that's basically always been our policy. And you pretty much nailed it in terms of how it works. Is the first one is a conversation that also gets recorded somewhere. The second one is like a written, more formal one. And the third one is, I'm going to help you get out of here in the next 2 weeks. We've always had that one. And frankly, I think that one was inspired by the system that we use in my time before MFF at the Four Seasons hotels. Was we had pretty much kind of a 3 strikes-ish policy. So I kind of brought that with me to MFF when we started. But I think we have kind of nuanced our approach to that based on a book, I think, that came out in 2004, maybe. But we discovered it many years later, which is Crucial Accountability, which was the same authors of the book Crucial Conversations. And Crucial Accountability basically gives another kind of framework for these conversations. And I think this framework is probably the one we teach more now these days. Not that you shouldn't still have a 3 strikes or out kind of disciplinary system, because that's necessary. Some people do need to be fired for egregious behavior. But more often than not, these are about small little things that are about just changing behavior. It's about performance management, not necessarily firing people. And this system for Crucial Accountability, and this is kind of my kind of bastardized version, so go read the book if you want the real thing. But the 3 steps in these conversations, still 3, is that in the first conversation, you focus on the behavior you want to change. So, hey, Pete, I saw you walk in the door 5 minutes late today. And in my method of my version of this, I share what I saw and how it made me feel, which made me feel a little bit confused because we just hired you last week and I told you how important being on time was. What's going on with you? And so I'm sharing my facts, I'm sharing my feelings, I'm inquiring about you, and we're going to move that conversation to an agreed upon action that we're both going to take and stay accountable to, right? That's the short version. Yeah. And so that's that first conversation, focus on the behavior. Second conversation, and you gave a version of this. Second conversation, you focus on the pattern of behavior. So not just the thing we saw, but the fact that you're seeing a pattern in this behavior. So the second conversation, you say, hey, Pete, got some feedback for you. Is now a good time? You're like, sure. I say, hey, Pete, I just want to point out I'm seeing a pattern of behavior. This is the second time I saw you walk in late. We talked about it last time. This was the action, and you made it better until today. So what happened today? We go with another action, more accountability. Then the third time, same thing. Hey, Pete, I have some feedback for you. Is now a good time? I get you over. I say, hey, now we focus on the cost of the behavior, right? The cost meaning, hey, I'm noticing this. We talked about this pattern of behavior last week, and now I want to reflect back to you. Saw you late again today. And it's really making me doubt whether you're the right person for this job. It's making me doubt whether you're in the right seat in this company, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think from there, I might then move on to an actual 3 steps of disciplining your out, right? So even for small things, we're talking about maybe 6 conversations before they're gone. So anyway, that's the framework we teach more often than not, which doesn't always end in a firing, but should escalate the conversations. What we're trying to avoid here is these Groundhog's Day conversations where you're just like, hey, you're late. I know, I'm so sorry, something happened. Okay, don't let it happen again. Hey, you're late. I'm so sorry. I know something happened. Don't let it happen again. It's like we have the same conversations over and over again, expecting different results, and they never come. So this method, this method of saying we're going to focus on the behavior, the pattern, and then the cost of the relationship helps kind of change the tone of the conversation and give it more weight over time.
It's funny. Everything you say applies as much or more to the way I should be raising my boys. We are dealing with never-ending patterns and patterns of lazy means of addressing it. On behalf of my wife and I, we are definitely super, super guilty of the, hey, we're having this conversation again. Okay. Yep. Here's your slap on the wrist. See you tomorrow. We'll do this again. Same time, same place.
Yeah. It's human behavior. It's like kind of natural kind of human tendency is to like see what we can get away with. And we keep making the same mistakes unless the consequence is painful enough, frankly. Humans only repeatedly do things we're rewarded for. And sometimes getting away with bad behavior feels like a reward. And so we'll keep doing it because we'll chase that little dopamine hit of like, wow, I got away with it. That might be a little slightly cynical take on human psychology, but that's been my experience. I see it happen time and time again.
It makes total sense. I think I should note that I'm not a consistent firer of employees. We really don't have to do that, thankfully, but it's important to take into consideration the fact that I have a much smaller team than you. And so as teams grow, these systems become so much more important. But we have a small enough team that there is a culture of mutual accountability in place that I don't need to have those conversations with my paid employees, honestly, often, if ever, because we have too tight of a dynamic to make that a habit. Behavior of that nature brings the whole team down. It's not about inconveniencing a client. It's about inconveniencing your colleagues, which is, to me, a way bigger offense, really, because it has a compounding effect on the clients kind of further down the road when the team is collectively more stressed, overworked because one person has bad habits. And so when I say that I have to utilize this system that I've mentioned, it's more with how we manage our interns.
Sure.
And they have a much longer rope as far as our patients go, because our internship is an unpaid role there are certainly perks that come with it between continuing ed and New Balance apparel and exposure to personalities and events and things like that we host in normal times. But they are oftentimes relocating from different countries, different parts of our country. They're paying their rent, their room and board to learn, and they're not collecting a paycheck or maybe a small stipend. And so it's not appropriate for me to go on firing sprees. But the overall framework of this system that you've outlined and that I mentioned I learned from you guys is very useful in how I teach my team how to manage them. And so we used to have this flat organizational structure where we're like, oh, there's Pete and Eric, and then there's everybody, and we're all friends. Look at how great this is. But it just meant that Eric and I were responsible for overseeing a lot of things that we didn't have the bandwidth for. And so we did shift to a different hierarchy, and I have directors beneath me, and it's their job to have those conversations. So I pretty much coach my coaches on how to do that coaching. And so I'm very rarely in a room reprimanding an intern who is under delivering. But my director of performance and my internship coordinator, John, are having those conversations with some frequency. And it's not that uncommon for him to say, hey, just so you know what's coming down the pipe, it's looking like this conversation is going to happen with so and so next week. If I don't see some dramatic shifts, would you like to be in the room? And if I'm here, I like to be in the room, but it's not a mandate per se. So very long-winded way of saying, you guys taught me this stuff, I use it, and I've spun this into a free consultation for myself.
No, I love it. And I think what's great about it is that you're right that these strategies are somewhat dependent on size of team a little bit, right? And that we found, since MFF team has shrunk because of COVID, we actually need to have less of these conversations because everyone's kind of on the same page. Everyone's in kind of a make it work attitude, and it's a smaller group of people who genuinely all really want to be there because we've shrunk down a bunch. And I think as you get bigger, these challenges just they scale up, right? I mean, with all the positive things that scale up, the negative things sometimes scale up too. And I think these kind of conversations just become more needed as your team gets bigger. But to your point, I think it's also
team, the harder it is to hide, is what I was going to say.
That's exactly it.
As staff downsizes, your bad habits are amplified. And so,
and let's be real though, at any size company, everyone knows who the underperformers are. Right. I mean, I've worked in companies with thousands of employees, and everyone knows who the people in each department are who are just the underperformers. And so that's the thing that, I'll say that I didn't say yet, which is that, all of your A players, all the people who are really great at their roles, they just want to be around other people who are great. And when they feel that managers like you and me, Pete, are letting people get by not reaching the same standards and the same, habits of excellence that they get disgruntled. That's when they move on. That's when they want to work somewhere else. And so much of being good at these kind of conversations also means that we have to be good at creating a foundation of praise and recognition for people doing great work, right? That all of these accountability conversations become much easier if it's on the foundation of you telling all the people who are doing it well that they're awesome every day, And I think that's what's got to be kind of come first and foremost.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, there are a lot of things that we discuss that they feel like common sense, right? They're things we've heard, they're things we've been told, but sometimes we need to get kind of kicked in the teeth to be reminded of how important these are, because sure, I've known for over a decade that I need to squash those things early so as not to lose the attention span of my A players. I know that stuff, but I still had to make the mistake and lose one or two like A+ people because I needed to be reminded that not only does this matter, but we're all susceptible to it. And so I had to have my team get really smashed up and crumble down before I started to say, I should have been listening to Michael. And so the people who are sitting there being like, yeah, guys, this makes sense, but my A+ players are out there right now doing their job. We got this. There is a moment of reckoning for all of our businesses once we hit a certain age. And for us, it was like 7, 8, 9 years old. There was a turning point where we just needed to get a little bit more intentional about how we developed our stars and how we compensated them and how we made them feel like they were doing something closer to a career than a job. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, that inflection point, that was when these lessons they went from like back burner to my whole job. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I talk to folks all the time, some of our Unicorn Society members and Business of Unicorns clients that say, my team was all crushing it. And then it stopped and then people were not crushing it. And I had to suddenly become a manager overnight. And I don't know when those inflection points come, if it's about age of an organization or size or who knows. But I think at some point, if you haven't focused on these things, being a really good everyday manager and leader, it'll become important at some point if it hasn't yet. And so taking these lessons to heart and start practicing now before you really need to, I think is always the best way to go. Yeah. Let me ask you this. I want to maybe start wrapping up in the next 5-10 minutes. And there's one more topic I wanted to ask you about. Mm-hmm. And this one, I'll start broad just because I'm not sure where to start it. But I want to talk about managing finances, right? Because so often, where I push myself to have these conversations on the podcast is really about some of the soft skills, because that's where I'm comfortable. Not that I'm not comfortable managing my finances, but it's just not a topic that really lights me up as much as a conversation about accountability and difficult conversations. But so many people that I'm talking to these days, their approach to managing their finances is, I'll say that again, that their approach to managing their finances is that they don't have one.
Yep.
That their approach to managing finances is bury their head in the sand, try to collect as much money as possible and hope they don't spend too much, hope they don't accumulate too much debt, only look at their credit cards when they have to, never look at their bank account. And so the strategy I see the most for managing finances in a training studio is avoidance. It's the number one strategy of people I talk to. And that's not a judgment, it's just an observation. I understand all the reasons for it, but we can all agree it's not the best strategy. And so when it comes to just the basics of managing your finances for your gym, what are some of the basics that you do that give you a sense of being in control of the cash flow or being in control of the financial management? What do you do that works for you?
Well, I think that in order to be able to embrace this concept of the basics, you need to start basic. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we did that is, from my perspective, becoming increasingly rare is we never spent money we didn't have, and we only started with what we needed. So my first space was, for lack of a better term, a shithole. Okay. we had cracked windows. We had dusty space. We had something that it was not representative of the dream, but it was our starting point. It was where we came in on day one. But what we did was we didn't overstep as far as what our spending potential was. And it allowed me to, from day one, run an operation that was just cash in, cash out. Don't spend more than you collect, and you will continue to be in business until the end of time. And we kept it so simple that it was basically a spreadsheet. Here's the receipts. Here's what we spent this month. Here's what we're expecting to spend next month. And here's what we're projecting for revenue generation.
Yeah.
At this point, at coming up on 14 years of doing this, I innately can pretty much project for you foot traffic, revenue, expenses, basically what overhead looks like within probably a 5% range of what it actually ends up being, without even having to think. It's just become second nature for me. So for me, I'm tracking things like what is our projected break even for the month, aka what's the day that Eric and Pete are guaranteed to take a paycheck this month. Sure. And I just compete with myself to bring that day on the calendar further and further down. And so for us, every single month, and this is a really random way of managing it, but for me, I know how much it's going to cost me to run the place this month. Mm-hmm. And I know that I want to start hearing cash register noises right around the 16th of the month. That's when we start a tipping point where it's like, hey, just about every dollar we collect from here on out becomes ownership money. And I'm just on a never-ending chase to compete with myself on that. And in doing so, it's hard to fall out of touch with our numbers. And it's just, I can't put my head in the sand because it is my whole job. I'm not a trainer. I've been the business person since day one. I live in spreadsheets. On my massive monitor here, I've got 4 Google Sheets and 2 Excel spreadsheets open all day, every day. I live in my numbers. So maybe that's the message that people need to appreciate. The fact that I know what bill is going to show up in the mail in the next 48 hours. I know roughly what it's going to look like. And I know that if it's not paid before I leave work that day, I'm going to be annoyed with myself that night as I lay down to go to bed. I treat my billing and invoices like you and Mark treat your email account. Touch it once. Like that is really how I'm doing it, because we've got great cash flow in that sense. And I don't need to worry about what's my, do I have 90 days to pay this sort of deal? No, I just want it out. I want it off the books. I want to be as in tune with how much money I have to spend at any given moment so that we can splurge on stuff when a staff member comes in and says, for example, John came in to my office in December and he said, I'd really like to get timing gates. I feel like it will dramatically improve the competitive dynamic and allow us to test some things that we haven't done in the past that clients are kind of quietly murmuring for, but they're going to run you almost $3,000 and be able to say, that's fine. We are,
Sure.
it feels like we're about 7% ahead of schedule this month. Let's do it. If not now, never.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was, I mean, maybe go put it on the credit card just for the points and pay it off that afternoon. It's just, I'm very aggressive in just getting my money out the door, so long as I know exactly where it's going and when.
Yeah, I think it's such a great answer, Pete. I love so much about what you said. I mean, one is I hear you really advocating for like a hyper focus on your numbers, right? And doesn't have to mean that's complicated, right? Keeping a hyper focus on just the very simple numbers that you just need access to, right? How much money you're bringing in, how much money is going out the door, and and I love the game you set up for yourself is like, at what point in the month do I know I'm going to be putting money in my pocket as an owner, and can I make that day earlier and earlier in the month? I think that's a really brilliant way of thinking about it. Is kind of you've kind of gamified it for yourself.
I've completely gamified it, and you know what? We moved one of our employee John, onto a model where he takes a salary, but he's got a revenue share in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has gamified his approach to business. So he's reconciling our numbers at the end of days too, because he's trying to project how he's going to earn. And it's got him so fired up to chase business and increase our operational efficiencies that now I've got a partner in crime on this front. Now, he's not worried about keeping our costs down because we haven't attached his payout to how we spend. That's why he has to come in and say, it kind of sucks that I'm asking you to spend $3,000 on timing gates, but I do believe it would help us drive business.
Yep.
He's not taking money out of his own pocket when he does that. He knows that it's coming out of mine.
Yep.
But he's so in touch with the numbers himself as far as foot traffic and collections go that he knows when it's safe to come into my office and make that ask.
Sure.
He coincidentally comes in when we're trending ahead of schedule and he says, hey, great news. We saw X bodies today. That's a 9% increase year over year. And by the way, I need you to buy me some timing gates. You're just like, you know what? You did your homework. You're on top of your numbers. Good pitch. Let's do this.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think it just goes to show that when you do have transparency in those numbers, and not just for yourself, but for members of your team, it can serve as a real motivation, right? For driving behavior, for driving business. You can tie financial incentives to some other activities. And those incentives can help you manage your finances better. We had managers on our team who were responsible for managing expenses, and they had a budget every month, and they were kind of incentivized to not go over that budget, and it's a way for us to manage our finances with the finances, and I think that kind of gamification, whether it's for you or for your team, is so valuable. And I just want to underscore with like a big bold marker, like, keep it simple. Just keep it simple. I'm not even advocating that. I don't think everyone should get great at QuickBooks or learn to read a P&L or a cash flow statement. I don't even think you need that. A simple spreadsheet for most people who are listening to this, who have a training gym, will be enough just to keep track of the actual numbers coming in, the actual numbers going out, and what the balance is. If you want to get fancy, I know I heard you talk about this before, that Mark and I are big fans of methods like Profit First. And the book Profit First for Micro Gyms, I think, is a great place if people want to get a little fancier with how they manage their cash flow. But for most people, if your head's just buried in the sand, I lovingly suggest that just start with a simple spreadsheet. Just start by knowing what your reality looks like on a weekly or monthly basis, and that'll be a huge step in the right direction.
I'd also encourage people to really work hard to establish a transparent relationship with their accountant.
Yeah.
My accountant is the best investment we make year over year. He understands our books so clearly now, with well over a decade experience in them. It adds this level of sanity that I otherwise wouldn't have, when I know that I can send my guy Tom an email and expect to hear back from him inside of 90 minutes, pretty much 365 days a year. The guy is an absolute rock star. He doesn't send me a book. He's more likely to send you a "yup, sounds good" email. But if that's what I need to feel like, all right, I'm on track with what I'm doing. Hey, Tom, this number seems a little bit high. Do I need to revise my quarterlies?
Yeah.
He'll just say, let's hop on a call Monday, 1, 3, or 5. It's just like, It
That's it.
it is he could 5x his cost for me. He's made himself indispensable.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
find yourself a great accountant and wear him out a little bit or her out. Make
Yeah.
make them earn that paycheck, because the more they over deliver early, the more familiar they become with your operation, the easier you become as a client in the long run. It's just like our clients, coach them up a lot early. You're not going to teach them how to foam roll and do their mobility work at the start of every single training sessions. They'll pride themselves on being competent in that sense.
Yeah.
I pride myself on knowing exactly what Tom expects from me. Like I said to you before we started, I was reconciling Q2 for 2020 before we jumped on this call, just to make sure that what I gave him was immaculate. And I know that he wants to see it from me by right around the 20th of January to make his life easier. So I'm going to chase it and chase it and chase it to make sure I put that in his hands. He is always on top of making sure that I know that 1099s need to go out the door by the 15th of January, understanding what he needs uploaded to his portal to reconcile our stuff and churn out a K1 for us. He's trained me, and I didn't even realize it. But it brings such a level of calm to how I understand my numbers, because I know that if I get confused or I'm feeling a little panicked about what something's looking like, Tom's just going to take my call and he's going to solve that problem.
Yeah, I think it's such a great point, Pete. I think it's for many people running training gyms. I think it's the first place most people should ask for help, right? Is when it comes to managing finance. And that might be like a bookkeeper might be the first person you need if you're just not good at managing the finances at all. And certainly a good accountant is just indispensable. But I think both those positions, if they really are good and you use them well, they'll pay for themselves and then some by saving you money in all kinds of areas, including taxes, which is a whole other topic we'll maybe talk about some other time. But
yeah, when I talk to another gym owner and they tell me that they do their gym's return on TurboTax or Tax Act, it gives me a panic attack.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I would never in a million years. But yeah, I get people's impulse. They want to try and keep the cost low, but this is not a place where your investment is going to be wasted if you find the right person. This is a place where your investment will come back to you, and many times over when you find the right person. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Well, I want to start wrapping it up because I want to be respectful of your time, and I figured we covered a lot of ground today. We talked about partnerships, we talked about underperforming employees and how to have those conversations. We talked about managing the finances. This is a full podcast.
Yeah, well, like I said, I didn't burden you with a tight little window this time. We were able to let it rip.
Seriously. Well, I still have a list of 5 other things we can talk about next time. So don't worry, the well has not run dry yet.
Round 4 or season 4, however you guys are packing it these days.
We'll see. At this point, I'm just trying to get out something every week consistently this year. I'm doing great so far. So I'm excited to see what all we talk about next, but I got plenty of ideas. Well, thank you, my friend. Just one more time, I know people know this, but how do people find you, find more about Cressy, how do people find you on the interwebs?
Well, I am most active on Twitter and Instagram, and I put them in that order because my Instagram is me screenshotting my Twitter, putting it up there. So my username's Pete_Dupuis, and my last name is not that fun to spell, but you'll see it in the show notes or on the title of this episode rather than me churning it out for you now. I did publish historically. In 2019, I published a blog a week for 52 straight weeks and burnt myself out and took some time away from it. And for the years before, from 2015 through 2019, I published a ton, like 200 blog posts, and they're all there, and I stand by everything I put there. I am actually writing this year. People just don't know it. I made a resolution for myself that I was going to write every weekday, kind of like morning pages type concept.
Sure.
And what I started doing was, and forgive me for going off script here,
but please.
I haven't talked with you about it. I started looking at the hundreds upon hundreds of tweets that I've published over the years and saying to myself, the confines of a character count of tweets are such that you have to really get clear on how you think. But what if there were no rules on that? Yeah. And what I did was I went into the archives of my tweets and I started expanding upon concepts. And so Monday through Friday, every evening after I put the boys down and my wife goes back into her email account to tidy up for the day, I take one tweet, I pull it up, and I turn it into something more like 200 to 500 words. and I've started doing this year, and I'm a little over 10,000 words in, and
Wow.
I have this kind of Seth Godin-esque like micro chapter Google Doc that is humongous all of a sudden, and I love it.
That's
It's
great.
making me kind of feel like I'm getting back to liking writing, even though I kind of burned myself out on that in 2019. So I am either, assuming I keep up my habit, which I've kind of fallen in love with, so I expect myself to, I'm either going to end up with like a book of sorts, or I'm going to have a 2022 daily blog that's just going to be pouring into your inbox all the time. Deciding how I'm going to use it, but it's accumulating, and I'm
Yeah.
pretty excited about it. So I'm aspiring to write 100,000 words this year in that format.
Amazing. That's such a brilliant
Okay.
idea. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea so much because so many people are putting out posts all the time, either on Twitter or on Instagram, and they're all short, little pithy things. But when you can go back and really take the time to say, okay, well, what else do I have to say about this? If I had to share my whole perspective on this, or give context for why I said this, what do I have to say? I think it's a brilliant way of just going back and mining your own data for
Well, and
new
you've done the
ideas.
hard part already,
Yeah,
because making something concise for Twitter is difficult.
it's so
If you have
hard.
kind of a big concept and you need to tidy it up and get it to sit down into that, I don't know, 280 character range or something like that,
Yeah.
that takes some strategy.
Mhm.
And so I've done that hundreds of times, and now it's really easy. It's like you've taken the governor off and
Yep.
you say, hey, no rules, make
That's
this a little bit bigger idea. And so I don't have to be creative. I just need to elaborate on
that's great.
concepts I've already rolled out. So
Yeah.
it's a writing hack. You could call it a shortcut, but it took me 5-6 years of content creation on the other platform to
Yep.
design my outline for this material.
Yeah, not so short. But yeah, I encourage you, listeners, to go back and take a look at Pete's blog from last year. I mean, I reference some of those articles with some of my clients on a regular basis. And on our last podcast, we talked about one article you wrote a while ago about networks. So, I mean, it's great material. And so go check it out. And I can't wait to see what you put out next, my friend. I'm so excited
Oh,
to hear, to read more of your thinking. But thanks for doing this. Thanks for being my guest yet again. It's always such a pleasure. Go have a kick-ass day.
thank you to you and the whole Business for Unicorns audience. Tell Mark I said what's up.
I will. I will.
All right.
Hey, friends, before you go, just one more thing. If you enjoy this podcast, you get value out of it, you enjoy listening, please share this podcast, comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Please share it with friends and family. We don't spend any money on marketing or advertising. And so the only way people find out about this podcast is from you. So please do everything you can to share it with friends and fellow colleagues in the fitness industry. We love making it and we want to keep doing it for a long, long time. So I appreciate your support. Go have a kick-ass day. Bye.